You're listening to On Mission with Dr. Matt Davis, a podcast designed to explore the personal mission of everyday leaders. Hear from men and women who are making a difference in their corner of the world and discover what keeps them on mission. Welcome to On Mission with Dr. Matt Davis. We are joined today by Dr. Matt Morrell, Senior Pastor of Fourth Baptist Church and School and President of Central Baptist Theological Seminary. Pastor Morrell lives in Plymouth, Minnesota with his wife, Kim. They have 5 children, and his first job was an assistant youth pastor, or an assistant/youth pastor at Chisago Lakes Baptist Church. His favorite meal is anything Mexican, and he enjoys downhill alpine snow skiing, water skiing, and I appreciate golf. You know, a little lower key, less adventure, but less injuries, I would hope. Right. His favorite sports teams are the Minnesota Vikings and the Twins, of course. Pastor, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Matt. It's great to be here with you.
It is the Fellowship of Matts here this afternoon.
That's right.
So we've got that going. I once read an article from somebody that said, the worst name ever is Matt. And I thought, it kind of caught my attention, and I thought that was kind of an unfair thing. And then I read through it, and they're like, it sounds terrible. You can't yell it. It ends in this truncated, you know. And I thought, what did a Matt ever do to you?
I don't know. If it's any comfort, my sister calls me Matty Cakes.
Oh,
so
man.
Matty Cakes is maybe better than Matt.
I was always Matt the Rat.
Matt
so
the Rat.
No one's allowed to use that against me, okay? I hear that on campus, you're expelled. Okay, that's just how that's going to go. But I really appreciate your testimony in your life. I got to tell you, the first time I even ever heard about Fourth Baptist. You want to hear that?
Sure.
I grew up in Danville, Illinois, and went to First Baptist Christian School.
Yeah.
And when I was a junior in high school, I played basketball, but I was a bench warmer because we had a really great basketball team with 5 seniors that had played together all 4 years, and they were dominant. And back in those days, Pillsbury had an invitational tournament for basketball for high schools, and we do that now with the SaberCats invitationals and things. But our team was invited to come up, and I was there just as a bench warmer, and it was a great time. I didn't see any playing time or anything like that. And our team was so good we won. Wow. And back in those days, Pillsbury would invite the winning team back the next year to the invitational. Otherwise, you weren't allowed to come every 4 years. Well, the problem was all those guys graduated.
Sure.
And now it was me and a bunch of the other guys that had never had any playing time. And we were terrible. And the 2 other real powerhouse teams that year were Grace from Kankakee and Fourth Baptist. And I'm like, Fourth Baptist? What happened to First, Second, and Third Baptist? And I thought I'd never heard such a thing. They were unbelievable. That team was so good. I couldn't hardly believe it. And they just dominated. And so it came down to them and Kankakee at the end. And, I mean, Fourth Baptist had 6 guys in the slam dunk contest. Wow. That we had, like a little skills deal. Sure. We didn't have anybody in the dunk contest. You know, I'm like, can you use a volleyball? You know, is that allowed? So I just thought, man, they just grow really good basketball players up there at Fourth. I don't know if you all still continue to have that.
We don't have the dunk contest, but there are others. But I don't know that we're dominating the way that maybe back in the day. When was that? In the 70s? Was that when you were in high school?
No, come on now. It was the early 90s. Okay, we'll say 91 probably at that point. So, yeah, but that was a pretty incredible experience. And then I met some of those guys at college, and it was interesting for them to go from like, mythical, iconic status to actually getting to know them. And over the years, that's been great. And honestly, the ministry there. So tell me a little bit about the church and the seminary, and you're the pastor of the church and the president of the seminary, and just explain a little bit about what's happening at Central and how God's blessing the ministry. Sure.
Well, Matt, a little bit of history. Fourth Baptist Church is a historic church from Minneapolis, and there's a number of legendary rumors about why it's called Fourth Baptist Church.
Oh, really?
We
is
think
there an official version?
Well, it may have been the fourth church plant out of First Baptist Church.
Okay.
W.B. Riley's historic church in Minneapolis. It may have been the Fourth Baptist Church on the west side of the Mississippi. It may have been a Bible study that began on 4th Street. We're not entirely sure, but 1881 is when it began, and
Wow.
for many years was a significant ministry in North Minneapolis. Central Seminary came along in the mid-50s when Pastor R.V. Clearwaters, who was a faculty member and dean at the seminary at Northwestern, presided over by Billy Graham, in fact, at the time. They closed the seminary. Dr. R.V. Clearwater said, hey, Fourth Baptist Church will take the seminary, we'll house it, we'll host it, and we'll perpetuate it. And so that's when Central Seminary was really birthed there as a ministry under the roof of Fourth Baptist Church.
You have a number of ministries, though. You have the Christian school, you have the seminary. I know at one point there was a radio station.
We do have a 50,000-watt AM radio station with an FM translator as well there in the city. So there is a lot there. And these are things that I inherited. I can't take any credit for them, but the goodness of God through the generations has allowed us to have these things. Fourth Baptist Church has subsequently moved out of North Minneapolis to the western suburb of Plymouth. And that was really the vision of Dr. Doug McLaughlin here about 25 years ago. And his desire was to leave a church plant in North Minneapolis to reach the urban core, but to relocate the ministry to the campus in the suburbs so that both the church plant in the city and the ministry in the suburbs could effectively reach those local communities.
Is that one called Fifth Baptist?
It's called Family Baptist.
Oh, Family Baptist.
It's pastored by, it's been Dr. Lee Ormiston for many years. His son now, Jason Ormiston, is pastoring there.
Oh, wonderful.
And they just do an outstanding job of connecting with the local community and really effective in reaching the urban core, while the rest of the campus now is in the western suburb of Plymouth. But so God has given us the church, the school, the seminary, the radio station, and such. But I stand on the shoulders of men like Doug McLaughlin and Ernest Pickering and others before them.
That's a very real thing in leadership, to inherit the heritage, the legacy of an institution. I feel that very acutely here. I think every day about not only the founder, but so many of our faithful leaders over the years, and not just the presidents either. I think about guys like John Brock and the professors and faculty that I had, and being a graduate, I have kind of an appreciation for that heritage, but it's more than an appreciation. It's literally a voice in your head almost of okay, not that it looms over you in a negative way, but it's just there's a weight there.
A huge weight.
That you've inherited something of value.
In fact, when the Lord led us to Fourth Baptist in 2008, I was 32 years old at the time, and there were 30 ordained men in the church. And these are pastoral staff, these are seminary faculty and such, and that was a heady thing for me. And there's a fine line between pride and insecurity. And I was proud of the stewardship that had been given to me, and I was terribly insecure about the stewardship that was given to me. And they're really two sides of the same coin. The reason you're insecure is because you're proud.
There could be a reason for it, though. I mean, there's a right aspect of, maybe the word is insecurity, but maybe what that is just a deference or a respect for your place in the pecking order. It's a heady thing to lead people who are at the top of their professional discipline.
Right. And who is sufficient for these things? Any ministry responsibility or any assignment, from the Lord. And in my youth, I remember, and even to this day, just moments of feeling the crushing weight of responsibility. And then other moments just so grateful for the opportunity and the privilege to carry on the mission, the Great Commission, the ministry model that I had inherited from men that are greater and wiser than me. And of course, I'm blessed to work with a team. So they say things rise and fall in leadership. That's partly true, but
mostly fall.
But okay, sure. I would say the blessing of having colleagues and coworkers and a plurality of pastors and professors that labor with me in the ministry there. It's a sweet thing.
How fun is that, right?
Oh, it's great. And when they're your friends, not just your colleagues, oh, it's a hoot.
Yeah, it's almost too much fun.
It's a lot of fun. I wouldn't trade it. Wild horses couldn't drag me from it. Love it.
I hear you.
Love it.
Although we both labor in climates that conflict with our golf obsession and our ability. So, it's interfering with my aspirations to join the professional tour because I can really only golf
That's right.
for like 4 months out of the year. So it's
well, in
it's held me
Minnesota,
back.
it's 3 months. But yeah, well, and maybe yours is an obsession. Mine is a little bit of a tolerance because
Okay.
I'm kind of like a social golfer, meaning I love to go to be with the guys. Often, visit places on the golf course that no one else has visited before.
Well, what do they call Minnesota? The land of 10,000 lakes?
Yes.
That doesn't bode well for a golf course.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. So, but it is fun in the summertime, to be out on the course with guys from the church or friends. And
so our podcast is devoted to conversations with leaders who are about something more than themselves, and that's not difficult for a pastor and a ministry leader like yourself. But we try to hit our guests with a pretty deep question, and that is really, what is your mission in life? What is your life about? What really drives you? And I wonder, have you ever sit down and really tried to figure out how you would articulate your personal mission in life?
Yeah, early on, of course, I think my life mission was myself, right? And in my youth, through adolescence and such, all the aspirations and the desires and the dreams and the goals of life were pretty self-centered. However, in the providence of God, through the course of my childhood upbringing, through the influence of youth pastors and Christian coaches and summer Bible camp and such, and then ultimately my years in Bible college, I concluded that God would have me in pastoral vocational ministry. And that gave me some vocational direction. As I further matured biblically and theologically, I came to the conviction, as most everyone has, that life is for the glory of God, the doxological priority. And it's cliche, right, in our circles to say, oh, to God be the glory, or we do everything to God's glory. But it's not just the 1 Corinthians 10:31, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do. I even back up further to the book of Genesis. Our creation is for God's glory. Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. Then you can move to Ephesians chapter 1, that we are saved to the glory of His glorious grace, and so our salvation, our creation, our salvation is for God's glory. And then, of course, I want my life vocation to be that as well. But that can be trite, and of course, fleshing that out. What comes after that? So, if I were to craft a mission statement for myself now, I would say my life purpose is for the doxology of God, and then secondly, the discipleship of man. Doxology of God, that's the glory of God. The discipleship of man would be, I think, the evangelism of the lost, the edification or the education of believers, which is really, of course, my professional efforts now pastorally, is to see those come to a saving knowledge of Christ and then obey in whatever He's commanded them to do. And so I try to see life through that lens, but as is the case for all of us, there's always the flesh that creeps up, and my life mission, the way I spend my time or my money or whatever else, sometimes can creep from that, and I have to bring myself back to center.
So let me start with where you started, in that your vocational calling to pastoral ministry seems to have been one of the very first things after you were saved. You said then through camp and evangelists and pastoral influences, you came to believe that God was calling you into vocational ministry. How do you articulate that to young men who feel that maybe God is calling them that way? How do you describe that process?
Sure. So I grew up in a ministry home. My dad was a pastor.
Yep.
And I had a great childhood and loved being a PK. But I didn't want to be a pastor because there were bigger, better, greater things to do, more adventure to be had. I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to go into broadcasting. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to make some money, travel the world. And so...
Not all lawyers make a lot of money.
Well, perhaps. Perhaps. It was the
Spoiler
summer...
alert.
It was the summer after my 8th grade year at the Wilds Christian Camp that I surrendered myself to vocational ministry with this mental reservation or caveat: I'll serve Jesus while I make my money. or I'll serve Jesus if I can have a good time doing it. And so from there, I went to Northland Baptist Bible College at the time, early 90s, to be a missionary aviation pilot, because I thought I could have fun flying a plane, but I could check the box that I'm serving Jesus. Until I looked at the class list. They had a small aviation program at the time, and all the classes were like mechanics classes. And I am not a monkey wrench at all. You had to like tear down an engine and rebuild it. I can barely change a light bulb, right? And so it was clear to me, okay, this is not what I should be doing. And the Lord just impressed upon me, I love the local church. And that's what I had grown up knowing. And there was no lightning bolt. There was no voice from heaven. There was no writing on the wall. It was just a burden that didn't go away, which would be my definition of a call, a burden that doesn't go away. I get burdened for everything all the time. Missionary comes through, shows their pictures, right? And for some remote place in Africa, and you get a burden for that. But 2 weeks later, you've forgotten about that. But the burden that doesn't go away and just continues to confront you and confront you and confront you. So I changed my major to pastoral. And
who did you talk to at that time about, just for advice?
Sure. My dad was one, and was always a mentor for me, great relationship. And then some of the faculty in Bible college. And I would encourage any student that's listening to this podcast, go to your faculty. They're not doing what they do for the money, but they're doing it because they love you, the student. And so I remember sitting with a number of them. I think an RA in my dormitory was one, and some other Christian friends. Hey, I've got this burden that's not going away. And of course, it was crystal clear to them. I was still in the fog, and they're like, "Well, hello."
Did they respond that way? Nobody said,
they did.
I don't see it.
They did. Well, this isn't coming from Satan, right?
Right.
This is God's prompting and pricking, and your desires in your heart are narrowing and clarified. And so it was over the course of weeks and months. And so I graduated from Bible college with a pastoral degree, went on to seminary, and haven't looked back. And I love being in pastoral ministry. And I'm telling you, I've traveled the world. I've had more fun. I haven't necessarily made more money, but all my needs are met. Are you kidding me? I've never been without want or without. And so...
Well, I can tell you that very similar life trajectory, PK.
Okay.
But I followed through on the law school ambition. And, became an attorney, but for the purpose of serving the Lord.
Sure.
And God opens the doors along the way to let you do the things that you think you might be afraid that you're giving up.
Sure.
When you submit your life to Him.
Absolutely.
And you don't manipulate things that way, but you find out that along the way it's not deprivation. It's not all, thankless sacrifice. Although there are times and things that you sacrifice. It's a joyful thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And everything that I held loosely and let go of in the imagination, the theater of my own mind, have been returned to me tenfold with opportunity and fulfillment. And so now that doxology of God and discipleship of man type of thing is the greatest mission, I think, that the Lord could have given me.
You described it, and I am just sitting here trying to kind of organize it, what I'm hearing. And it sounds to me like God gave you this desire. You called it the burden that doesn't go away.
Right.
It was an aptitude fit with the skills and disposition that He gave you, because you obviously tried to go down this other route with mechanic, and you said, no, that doesn't fit, but this does. And then there was a confirmation of godly mentors that you went and talked to that said, well, this is a godly desire, and they fostered that and encouraged that. That really, all three of those together helped to provide that calling to ministry.
Yes.
And I think you see that pattern in Scripture as well.
Absolutely. I didn't fully appreciate it at the time.
Right.
I was taking a mission trip, or you work at a summer camp, or you're serving in your local church, or you've got a mentor or a teacher or a coach, and all these things are converging, and then there's clarity in your own mind. And so the beauty is looking back now and seeing the divine order of all those things. But you've outlined it well.
Only time tells, as to the faithfulness issue, as to a lifetime of faithfulness. And we all look at those that we look up to, that lived a lifetime of faithfulness, and I aspire and pray that God will, help me to preserve my testimony so that I'll be useful to Him over my entire life. Right. And it's short, but it's long, and how many, sadly, you and I both in overseeing organizations and ministries that prepare men for ministry, sadly, they don't all last a lifetime.
Right.
And, I think our results are better than the normal. Right. I think it's something like 17% are still in the ministry after 10 years that prepared through seminary and for the ministry. Boy, that's pretty that's pretty discouraging to think about it. And there are many reasons for that. But that faithfulness element is really, yes, it's the Lord's working in our hearts and our lives, but it's also a personal purpose and commitment to that calling. Right. And so there's a desire and aptitude of confirmation, but then there's also the diligent faithfulness every day.
Sure. And I think some of that diligent faithfulness every day is a fruit of the conviction regarding that calling and regarding that mission. If I'm just trying a thing, experimenting with a thing, test driving a thing, as soon as the storm clouds roll in, I'm out. I'm looking for an exit ramp. I'm quitting. I'm pivoting. But if there is that call or that conviction that is so deep and rich, I think the Lord will use that to help sustain you through the trying times when on every Monday morning a pastor writes his resignation, right? Because
have you had days like that, or
I've never physically done it, but sure, yeah. you question, am I any good at what I'm doing? Am I making a difference? How did I get here? I could certainly be making more money doing a different thing, but you retrace in your mind and your heart how the Lord has led. And then I said, wild horses couldn't drag me from it. I mean, that's the conclusion of that thought process. You say, no, you know what? I'm on mission, and I'm committed to it. I know how I got here, and so by God's grace, if the Lord sustains me, it will be faithful. And now at this stage, so I'm 46. At this stage, my prayer is, Lord, help me not to disqualify myself. Help me to be faithful, to persevere. Yeah. Until the end, and because there have been casualties and otherwise among our peers.
Those are weighty warnings, flashing red lights in my mind. I can remember the first time, even as a teenager, when I heard about just at some other ministry, an assistant pastor that had an infidelity situation and disqualified himself from ministry. And I remember how upsetting that was to me. I barely knew the person. Sure. But as a teenager, how upsetting that was to me. And all throughout Scripture, you see grave warnings to guard your life and your testimony and your relationships, not just because that might wash you out of the ministry or cause you to suffer consequences, but how devastating that is when a ministry leader falls, how devastating that is to the faith of so many people that look up to them.
Right. Paul told Timothy, take heed to yourself. And that's just really critical for us in our qualification. And because of a place of leadership that God has put us, and those that are watching or those that are following, it can absolutely disillusion many. And Satan gains a foothold. He can smear the cause of Christ. He can devastate a ministry. And he can really capsize an individual when there is hypocrisy or hidden sin or whatever else, may come. And so, may God preserve us, for the years to come.
So have you been in a leadership role at Central since you first came to Fourth? Is that kind of a package deal? Or
well, yes and no. So historically, the pastor of Fourth Baptist was the president of Central Seminary.
Right.
And for years, Dr. R.V. Clearwaters, Dr. Doug McLaughlin, Dr. Ernest Pickering, and then Dr. Doug McLaughlin returned for a second coming, and as well a joint office there. Okay. However, in 2002, perhaps, 2003 maybe, Pastor Dr. Doug McLaughlin was weary of the pastor and the presidency roles.
That is a lot.
In fact, and he had a condition called pernicious anemia anemia, where he was needing regular B12 vitamin shots just for the energy to continue. And so at that point, the offices were separated, pastor and president. Dr. Kevin Bowder became the president of the seminary, while Doug McLaughlin remained as the pastor. And that model worked really well. I then followed Doug McLaughlin as the pastor while Kevin Bowder was the president. We had a great working relationship. And if you know Kevin Bowder, he is a scholar. He's a gentleman. Did a tremendous job. However, he wanted to live the life of the mind. He wanted to read and write and teach.
He was pretty open about that.
Yes.
Like, reluctantly.
He says, I don't want to travel and raise money and recruit students. And so the board wisely set him apart to be research professor of systematic theology. Dr. Sam Horn came as the president, and the Lord used him in tremendous ways for a number of years. He was part of our pastoral staff as well. But then, in 2015, when Sam Horn went to Bob Jones University, the board huddled up and said, why don't we revert back to the historic model of the pastor-president? And that's where the presidency of the seminary also fell to me. And by God's grace, it's working well. We have a provost, of course, academic dean, and some of these others that really do the heavy lifting. In fact, I liken myself to the Queen of England.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in this way. Well, she's dead.
There's a king
I'm
now.
I'm the king of England. But there's a prime minister, right? The prime minister runs the country.
Okay.
The king, just kind of waves, and it's really these other. The prime minister, Brett Williams, is our provost. John Pratt is our dean, and these men, of course, Kevin Bowder and others that really do the heavy lifting at the seminary, but.
I think you're probably just being modest, but
I
understand.
But I'm sincere.
Need for a division of responsibilities because it's different skill sets.
It is different skill sets. I'm a practitioner. I'm a pastor. I'm not a scholar.
But see, your voice is so essential into the practical preparation of people who are going to be effective doing what you do.
Well, and that's
if you turn it completely over to, quote, the academics,
right.
which I don't buy that necessarily, but then you lose a little bit of that in-touchness.
Right.
That's essential.
Well, and that's one of the things I appreciate about Fourth Baptist and Central Seminary is the pairing of the church with the seminary. But so there are other men that are doing the heavy lifting and the scholarship and the teaching. But the consolidation of the pastorate and the presidency into the single office does provide some efficiencies and solidarity of direction or vision or mission as well. And so as the Lord would have it, it's working for us. And it's a model that's seen in other places. There are other church seminaries, combinations where the pastor might have
I can't
both roles.
think of too many that are as large and as complicated as your situation, though.
Perhaps, but it's what the Lord's given us, so we're doing it. No?
So how are you balancing? You've got, how old are your kids?
I've got 5 kids, 1 boy, 4 girls. And my oldest is 22, then 20, 18, 15, and 12. And
so they need your time.
They do, and my wife, and my golf. I need some time, right? All that, right?
That's probably last on the list.
Okay, but by definition, a balance is something that's maybe never achieved, but always something that's correcting, right? So you're a little bit out of balance here, so you got to shift left, and then you're a little bit out of balance, and you shift back, and you're always feeling that sensation. And I think there are times where I've done that well. I think there's many times I haven't. Because I suspect, like yourself, we're workaholics because we love the work. We love the ministry.
I don't even like that term because, I don't even know what that means. You'd rather have somebody in leadership that was kind of, give or take.
Right, but we don't punch in and punch out and wash our hands of it. And, we're always checking our phones and we're always on call and we love it. And so, and that can become an idol in our lives, right?
True.
So sometimes we have to pull back, and our wives are helpful with this. And there are times where, our physical body fatigues and we are brought up short with sickness or whatnot. But it's a balance. I think the genius in it all is not trying to do it all, but recognize God has given, in my case, in your case, colleagues and teammates. We have a plurality of pastors at Fourth Baptist, which is a blessing. Not every pastor has that. Not every church has that.
What do you mean you have a plurality of
We've
pastors?
got multiple in our pastoral staff. So
Okay.
I'm the senior
Some
pastor.
people use the term plurality as a
And
little
an
different.
elder rule type
Yeah.
of thing. Okay, we're not elder rule.
Okay.
We're congregational governed, but we have multiple pastors.
Yeah, I see.
And so we have the youth pastor, and we've got the seniors pastor, and we've
Specialists.
got the music
Yeah,
pastor. And,
sure.
But I don't see the youth pastor as a junior pastor, as a half pastor.
No.
He's
And you don't
completely
see teens as potential future members either.
No,
Yeah,
right.
These are real.
Right. So in fact, one of the workshops that I'll be doing tomorrow is titled "A First Among Equals: Plurality Without Parity," and so I'm going to be making the case with our pastoral staff. We're all equally pastors.
Mm-hmm.
I may be a first among equal, senior pastor, or a lead pastor, of course, is the contemporary term, right?
Oh,
Or
okay.
the pastor of preaching and vision. You know, some of this nomenclature that happens.
Yeah, I really love that.
But
Not so much.
with the shared responsibility, maybe that's the way I'm saying it. I don't have to do it all, and everything doesn't have to rise and fall on me alone. But having the shared thing, and of course then as God would have it, giving us deacons that serve the pastors and the congregation as well,
Right.
super helpful. And so many of our lay people without a title that are doing the work of the ministry, Ephesians 4, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Equipped to do that. So so I'm not a Superman.
It's not the pastor's job to evangelize the entire community and perform all the teaching and all of the everything in the church. That's his job to equip and to build
Right.
and encourage, but that's really
Right.
every member,
Right.
Outreaching. So
Right.
what are some things within the church that you've done to try and meet that other part of your mission where you're talking about the discipleship of man through evangelism and education?
Sure. Well, one of our pastors, Jeremy Steffens is his name, is specifically tasked with outreach and discipleship. And so from maybe first contact to commitment, maybe we would say the visitor to a baptized believer, type of a thing. That's some of the focus of his attention. Does a lot of biblical counseling for us, which is biblical discipleship, bringing the Bible to bear upon people's needs. Is some of his focal point. I think stating that type of a mission, not just personally but corporately, keeping that in front of people will help to remind us regularly, why are we here? What are we doing? We're not a country club in the suburbs.
Yeah.
Just to enjoy ourselves.
Yeah, we didn't move out of the inner city so we could be out here and live a country club life.
Right.
Well, let me ask you that, because Minneapolis in particular has been a bit of a hotbed culturally. You've had some of the attention of the nation focused in on some not so great circumstances and a lot of public reaction to that. On top of that, we have our culture, I don't say this lightly, literally going to hell all around us. And it is dark. The prospects for ministry seem to be diminishing, not growing in a politically acceptable way, I should say. God will never not be working, and I don't mean it to say that. So how does your church, how did your ministry at the seminary, how are you responding to the cultural attacks and changes and the environment that you find yourself ministering there?
Well, I don't know that I have a great answer for you. We're feeling our way through it. Everything politically, economically, socially, there's unrest. There's things are moving and shifting, and just surviving the pandemic and the COVID years.
Yep.
There's division over masking and vaxxing and politics,
win.
and
you take
can't.
a stand one way. There's a group saying the other thing. And
It's horrible. But here's what we've tried to do: is we've tried to not obsess about the justice or the injustice of all that's happening through the media. And we've tried to keep our focus centered on the gospel and on corporate worship and the discipleship of believers. So, for example, this past Sunday evening, we received 20 new members. We had our baptism service, testimonies, new members, and there were 6 different nations that were represented in those 20.
That is
and it was really a beautiful thing. Even as we think toward the book of Revelation and being around the throne, every tribe, every tribe and tongue and nation and people group in a small way. It was represented even there in our midst for that event. And so you're coming to us from Somalia, you're coming to us from China, you're coming to us from the urban core. We're not talking about politics, and we're not even trying to debate equality or equity issues and CRT and all these types of things. We're just really keeping the gospel front and center.
Those things won't save anybody.
Right.
Only the gospel.
Right. And I think Satan can use those things just to really create confusion. Now,
for sure.
we've got positions and convictions regarding all those things, but there's always a temptation, I feel, pastorally, when people are sending me a link or giving me an article or telling me, hey, did you see, that podcast or that Fox News or this alternative media?
Yeah.
What's the church going to say about this?
Are you getting that? I get this all the time. People send it to me. What's Maranatha going to comment about this?
Right.
And I would say, that ain't our thing,
That's
man.
right.
I'm not
That's
commenting
right.
anything.
That's right.
Okay. I mean, whether it's identity politics
Yes.
or it's this emphasis month or it's
Yes.
this day or this cultural thing that happened or this shooting or whatever.
Right.
What's your comment? Everybody
Right.
is forcing you, and now I got to go change my profile
Yep.
picture, and I got to
Right.
put on a certain wristband and a pin and all. It's just virtue signaling.
Right. Exactly.
And it isn't saving anybody.
No. And it's just ends up being divisive to the body. We had one gentleman demanded to meet with our pastoral staff and said, why isn't the truth being preached from this pulpit?
Whoa.
We said, no, what truth is that?
Yeah, what did we miss?
He said about the stolen elections in Georgia here a few years back.
Oh, my goodness.
And I said, well, respectfully, I have no idea if they were stolen. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't.
We're in Minnesota.
But we're in Minnesota, right? Yeah. That's not what we do on Sunday mornings.
And if you were in Georgia, I doubt you'd be talking about it either.
Well, somebody needs to hear the truth. And if it's not coming from this pulpit, where are we going to hear it? And I said, well,
how about turn on any cable
that's
news?
Right. That's right. So keeping the main thing, and really even with your podcast here, On Mission,
right.
I think is just so critical and key. And, Paul says this one thing I do, not these many things I dabble in.
That's good.
This one thing I do. And that laser focus regarding the gospel or the discipleship of man, the evangelism and edification of man, I think is a fulfillment of the Great Commission, and that's what we got to commit to.
So speaking of the Great Commission and the fact that you have the world coming to your church, but you've also led some mission efforts globally.
Sure.
And I saw that you've been to Romania and working with a college in India, which I'd love to hear about.
Sure. Well, going back to the comment I made earlier, I wanted to travel the world. Remember that when I was young?
Yeah.
God has allowed me to be in 22 countries, right? And visiting missionaries and seeing ministries and teaching and preaching. And you know what it reminds me? That the gospel is not a Minnesotan thing, and it's not an American thing. And Christ Church is not just my local church, but in fact, it's big and it's global. And the blessing to be around the world and to see that the gospel is going forward and Christ is building his church is just a great thing. And what we are doing here in Wisconsin and Minnesota is in fact small potatoes compared to what God is doing in some places around the world. And that keeps things in perspective for me. And it gives me those Holy Ghost goosebumps, when you're just like, this is great.
You get a little doom and gloom when you watch the news and you read these websites and you're looking at the prospects of where we've been just from a religious freedom standpoint and from a social and cultural standpoint. It seems like everything is pitting one group against another. And it's a little doom and gloom. And I've had the opportunity to be to India a couple times in the last few years and work with some colleges over there. And all of a sudden you realize, ooh, wait a minute.
Right.
God is working and moving, and let's just be a part of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would say to any young person here at Maranatha listening to this podcast, don't miss the bus. Because God is doing stuff, and you can go play your golf and you go be a lawyer. If God wants you to be a lawyer, all right, Matt?
Be the right kind
be
of
the
lawyer.
right kind of lawyer, and make your money or whatever you do. But I mean, don't stoop to be a lawyer if God would have you be a missionary.
Yeah.
Or don't stoop to be a pilot if God would have you be a pastor.
Yes. You'll be miserable.
Yes.
And there's nothing more fun, enjoyable, joyful, joy-filled, and rewarding than being in the center of God's will. There's nothing more miserable, even if you're successful. financially or however the world would say, and not being where God wants you to be.
Absolutely. Well said.
I appreciate you coming on the podcast and spending some time. You're here for the Leader to Leader Conference, and we are looking forward to your workshops and just the opportunity to minister together. It's a privilege to serve the Lord together, and I appreciate the spirit of camaraderie and friendship that we can have, but that our institutions have shared over the years, and that we don't have to be. We can show young people that we don't have to be rivals and competitors in ministry. We are truly co-laboring.
Amen.
And that there is plenty to go around, and that we believe that God has called each of us. We're unique institutions with unique heritage and history and emphasis, but that God is blessing. I appreciate your faithfulness.
Thank you, Matt. And I would say just this as we conclude, thank you for what you do here, because the preparation, the training that you're doing here has strengthened our ministry because of the Maranatha people that we've been able to employ or have been members of our church and our ministry has strengthened our ministry.
And the same that going the other direction. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for joining us today. On Mission is a production of Maranatha Baptist University. Subscribe to On Mission on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review, as this will help other growing leaders find these conversations. For information about our guests, previous episodes, and general information about On Mission or MBU, go to mbu.edu/podcast. Join us again next week as we examine what keeps leaders on mission.